Welcome to Life Redacted, your trusted source for all things related to living life. From practical tips to thoughtful insights, we're here to help you navigate the twists and turns of everyday living. Whether you're looking for advice for your next purchase, inspiration for your next project, or just a fresh perspective on what's going on in this world, you've come to the right place. Love what you're hearing? Hit that subscribe button to stay in the loop on our latest episodes, and don't forget to give us a like if you're enjoying the show. It means the world to us and helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. Today, we're strapping in for a pretty intense deep dive. We're looking at a bunch of technical sources you shared with us, all pointing towards the rumored camera system in the upcoming Samsung S26 Ultra. Now, every year, it seems like manufacturers get into this. We call it specification warfare, right?
Yeah, definitely. Big numbers get thrown around.
Exactly, and they claim they finally cracked mobile photography. So our mission today is really to cut through all that noise.
Yeah.
We need to look past that headline number, 250 megapixels,
Right.
and figure out if the stuff underneath, the advanced binning, the AI processing, is this a real leap forward?
Or just more marketing hype.
Precisely. Is it genuine innovation or just, another small step? Okay, so let's try and unpack this. 250 megapixels. I mean, that number, it just sounds kind of absurd, doesn't it? Especially when you think how long we stuck with, 12 megapixels as the standard?
Right. It feels like a huge jump.
So when you see a figure like that, I think your first reaction, your gut reaction, should probably be skepticism. But okay, we need to figure out what Samsung is actually supposedly doing with all those pixels. They can't just be for printing it on the box.
Well, skepticism is definitely warranted. I mean, we see this cycle all the time in the mobile industry, these inflated promises. And historically, for anyone who understands, the basic physics of light, the rule was always pretty simple. If you cram more and more tiny pixels onto a sensor, unless that sensor gets massively bigger, you just end up with less light per pixel.
Which means more noise, worse pictures, and anything but perfect light.
Exactly. It's a recipe for, frankly, poor image quality. So what's really critical here is telling the difference between just small, incremental improvements, maybe a slightly better lens coating, a slightly faster chip, and something that's actually a real paradigm shift.
A fundamental change.
Right. And the sources we're looking at, they suggest this 250 megapixel sensor isn't just a bigger version of the old thing. If these rumors hold water, this looks more like a calculated shift in architecture. It could fundamentally change how mobile photography works, mainly through its computational strategy.
Okay.
So the real question is this the moment mobile cameras actually start to overcome the physical limits of tiny lenses and sensors? Or is it just, firing another big number in the ongoing megapixel war?
That's the core question we need to tackle. But before we dive into the architecture that might actually make those 250 million pixels useful, let's pause for our sponsor. Face Naturals Organic Skincare. Did you know that your skin is not only your largest organ, but also one of the most vital in protecting your body and supporting overall health? What you apply to your skin matters because it absorbs up to 80% of what you put on it, allowing those ingredients to enter your body. So why use conventional skincare products filled with harmful, toxic ingredients that can do more harm than good? At Face Naturals, we believe in nurturing your skin with safe, natural, and effective ingredients that support your health and well-being. Visit facenaturals.com to explore our range of natural skincare products designed to protect and nourish your skin. Visit facenaturals.com to save 10% on your next healthy skincare purchase. Healthy skin starts here. Welcome back. Okay, let's start with the main event here, that primary sensor. We've established the historical problem. Huge megapixel counts usually mean tiny, noisy pixels. So how is Samsung reportedly tackling the physics? Starting with just the physical size of this thing.
Right, so they seem to be attacking it on two fronts. And the first one is, indeed, size. The leaks are pointing towards a custom isocell unit. Now, for listeners, isocell is Samsung's own sensor tech.
They use those little barriers between pixels.
Exactly, to minimize light spilling between adjacent pixels, which is super important when they're packed so tightly. And this rumored sensor, it's potentially getting close to a pretty substantial 11.1-inch optical format.
Okay, 11.1 inch. How big is that in context?
It's significant for a mainstream phone. I mean, it's not quite the full 1-inch sensor you see in some niche photography phones, but it's a really large surface area for a flagship device.
Got it.
But, and this is the crucial part, even with that size, cramming 250 million individual pixels onto it still means the physical pixel pitch, the actual size of each light gathering site, is going to be incredibly small.
Tiny?
Yeah, really tiny, likely well under 0.6 micrometers, so that's the challenge right there. Physically, each pixel is still going to struggle to gather much light on its own.
Okay, so the physical size helps, but it doesn't solve the problem entirely. The pixels are still tiny, which means poor light gathering individually. So if the physical size isn't enough on its own, the whole system must lean heavily on computation, right? This is where the binning comes in.
Exactly.
We've heard of nanocell before, that was the 3x3 grouping. But these S26 ultra sources keep mentioning hexadecapixel binning.
Yeah.
Can you break that down? What's the mechanism, and why is it supposedly the key innovation here?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Hexadecapixel binning. It refers to a 4x4 grouping of pixels.
4x4, okay.
Right. So it's a mechanism that combines the data, the light information from 16 physical pixels, and treats it as one single massive logical pixel. And this isn't just, a small evolution from 3x3. It potentially changes the whole low light game.
How so? What does that do for the final image?
Well, think about it. If you take the full 250 million physical pixels and you divide that by 16, you end up with a final image output of 15.6 megapixels, which is a very sensible, high-quality resolution for most situations.
Right, comparable to what many phones output now anyway.
Exactly. But the way it gets there is different. The theoretical gain you get by mathematically merging the light captured by those 16 tiny physical sites is potentially immense.
So you mentioned this idea of a logical pixel size potentially getting over 2.8 micrometers. Can you benchmark that for us? How does that compare to what leading phones do now?
Yeah, that 2.8 millipixel figure, if it's accurate, is frankly staggering. I mean, right now, a lot of top-tier flagship phones aim for a logical pixel size somewhere around 2.0 meters after binning, maybe 2.4 millimeters in some cases, and that's considered excellent.
Okay.
If Samsung actually hits 2.8 nanometers, they're essentially creating a logical light bucket that has roughly 40% more surface area than even the best current logical pixels out there.
Wow.
It promises, theoretically at least, unparalleled light gathering capability. You're essentially capturing 16 times the initial light data before the heavy image processing even kicks in.
So what does that actually mean for the photos I take? Less noise, better colors in the dark.
Both, hopefully. It should mean drastically reduced noise, especially that ugly color noise and digital grain you see in shadows, and vastly improved dynamic range in tricky situations. Think like dimly lit restaurants or street scenes at night. And maybe the best part is it achieves this kind of light efficiency without needing those really long multi-second exposures you often get with night mode.
Ah, so it's faster, more instantaneous.
That's the idea. The hardware architecture, the binning itself, is doing the heavy lifting to gather light, not just relying on holding the shutter open forever while the software tries to piece things together. It should feel much more like a normal shot.
Okay, that low light binning part makes a lot of sense. It kind of justifies using such a huge sensor if you can group the pixels effectively. But let's go back to the full 250 MP native resolution. You mentioned earlier its main purpose might be computational zoom. Now, that still sounds a bit like marketing jargon for just cropping an image. Why is cropping a 250 MP image fundamentally different or better than cropping, say, a 50 MP image?
It really comes down to the density of the information you start with. When you do a digital zoom on a standard, say, 50 MP sensor, even just a 2x zoom starts to look pretty soft pretty quickly.
Yeah, you see the blockiness, the artifact.
Exactly. Because the initial pixel density just isn't high enough to cleanly cover the area you're trying to enlarge. You're essentially magnifying the gaps in the data.
Okay.
Now, with 250 million pixels, you have this just immense sea of raw data to begin with. So when you use that native 215p mode, which you probably only do in really bright ideal light, it gives the system incredible headroom.
Headroom for what?
Headroom for zooming computationally. When you pinch to zoom, say to 2x or maybe even 4x, what you're effectively doing is using a central portion of that massive 250 MP frame, maybe a 60 MP crop for 2x, or a 15 MP crop for 4x, roughly speaking. But because the original capture contains so much fine detail, that central crop still retains near lossless quality. It's basically the computational equivalent of having a separate, shorter telephoto lens built in, but it's achieved by intelligently cropping the main sensor's massive output.
Huh. That's actually quite clever. So that Samsung bridged that awkward gap you often get between the main 1x lens and when the dedicated optical zoom lens kicks in, that zone that often looks kind of mushy.
Precisely. It aims to make that 2x, 3x, 4x range look much closer to optical quality before you even switch to the dedicated telephoto hardware.
Yep.
And as you hinted, this whole system, it's not supposed to be static. The sources we've seen talk a lot about intelligent adaptation, driven by the new ISP, the image signal processor, in the NPU, the neural processing unit. Inside that rumored Exynos 3400 chip, we're supposedly moving into variable binning.
Variable binning. Okay, I want to push back on that a little.
Yeah.
That sounds great in theory, switching between what, 2x2, 3x3, and this new 4x4 grouping depending on the light conditions.
Right.
But doesn't that add just immense processing complexity? Is there a risk the camera feels like it's constantly hunting for the right setting, or maybe gives you inconsistent results from shot to shot?
That is absolutely the engineering tightrope they have to walk. You're right. The system needs to be incredibly fast to adapt almost instantly, and the algorithms behind it need to be smart enough to avoid that kind of jarring hunting behavior. The idea is that the dynamic switching isn't just based on one simple factor like light level. It's supposedly using a combination of real-time metrics, things like the current ISO sensitivity, the shutter speed the camera wants to use, and critically, the zoom level you've actually selected.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. So let's say you're indoors, maybe moderate light, not super dark, and you decide to zoom into 2x. The system might analyze the scene and decide, okay, 4x4 hexadeca binning is overkill here, but 2x zoom needs good detail. So it might dynamically switch to 3x3 non-accel binning.
Which gives you what resolution?
That would give you a higher resolution 27 megapixel image, 250 divided by 9, which is great for that 2x crop, while still providing really good light sensitivity from the 3x3 grouping. It's about finding the optimal balance for that specific shot.
Okay. Balancing resolution and sensitivity on the fly.
Exactly. But, and this goes back to your point, to actually execute this level of dynamic processing, the sheer computational power required is just astronomical. This is where that rumored 2-nanometer manufacturing process for the Exynos 3400 becomes absolutely critical.
Because it needs to be powerful, but also efficient.
Both. It doesn't just have to handle the fire hose of raw data coming off that 250 MP sensor. It also has to run these incredibly complex algorithms, noise reduction, merging the spatial data from the binned pixels, deciding which binning mode to use, and do it all within milliseconds.
To avoid shutter lag.
Absolutely. Zero shutter lag is the goal. If that 2-millimeter chip can't deliver enough raw processing muscle, or if it's not efficient enough and overheats, then the whole promise of this adaptive 250 MP system just kind of collapses under its own weight. The processor is really the unsung hero or potential villain in this whole story.
Right. That shutter lag, or lack thereof, is going to be the real acid test, isn't it? We need to see instant capture, especially when you're juggling this much data.
Absolutely. That's one of the first things independent reviews are going to have to scrutinize really closely.
Okay, we've spent a good chunk of time on the primary sensor, and it sounds fascinating, but like you said, even the best sensor in the world is useless if the optics in front of it are garbage.
True.
So let's shift focus now to the supporting cast, as you call it, the specialized lens array. To keep up with that monster primary sensor, what innovations are we expecting in the telephoto system?
Right. So the S26 Ultra is widely expected to continue Samsung's tradition, the Ultra hallmark, of having a dual telephoto setup. Typically one shorter telephoto for portraits, maybe 3x or 5x, and then one longer periscope lens for that extreme zoom.
Okay, standard stuff so far. What's new?
The real innovation is rumored to be in the mechanism of that long-range periscope lens.
Oh, so?
Well, instead of having static, fixed focal length lenses, like we mostly see today, where the phone, jumps abruptly from maybe 5x optical to 10x optical, and everything in between is digital or hybrid zoom, the rumors are pointing towards a genuinely variable optical zoom mechanism.
Wait, variable optical zoom? Like continuous zoom?
Right.
A smartphone periscope?
That's the speculation, yeah.
Yeah.
It would mean the actual lens elements inside that folded periscope assembly could physically move, shift their positions to achieve continuous, truly lossless optical magnification across a range. Maybe, say, moving smoothly from 5x all the way to 10x, or perhaps even 3x to 10x, all within that single periscope module.
Wow. Okay, hold on. Continuous optical zoom in that tiny space. That sounds like an immense mechanical challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you make lens elements move that precisely inside a phone without introducing huge potential for failure or light leaks or misalignment?
It's incredibly difficult. You're talking about using micromotors, probably specialized actuators like micro-stepping motors that can control the position of lens groups with micron-level precision.
Micron level.
Yeah. And the main difficulty, as you guessed, is maintaining thermal and mechanical stability. Any tiny vibration, any expansion or contraction due to heat, any slight misalignment during that movement, boom, the image is ruined instantly.
So if they pull this off,
If they pull it off, it means that when you're zooming between, say, 5.1x and 9.9x, you're not relying on digital cropping anymore. You'd be getting genuine, crystal clear optical quality throughout that entire range. It would be a huge step up.
okay. And of course, as you zoom further out, getting to that 10x optical range, stability becomes exponentially harder. What kind of stabilization would be needed to keep those shots sharp?
Yeah, you absolutely need the best possible image stabilization. That means a combination of robust hardware stabilization, OIS, optical image stabilization working together with enhanced EIS, electronic image stabilization.
Remind us of the difference quickly.
Sure. OIS physically moves either the lens elements or the sensor itself to counteract your handshake. EIS, on the other hand, uses data from gyro sensors to detect motion and then digitally crops or shifts the image frame slightly to keep it stable. They usually work in tandem for the best results, especially in video.
Okay. So what's the cutting edge rumor here for stabilization?
Well, the most extreme engineering feat being rumored is applying sensor shift OIS specifically to that folded periscope module.
Sensor shift on the periscope.
Yeah. Sensor shift OIS, where you move the actual image sensor instead of just the lens, is generally considered more effective, especially for correcting larger movements. But applying that to an already complex, heavy, and potentially moving periscope assembly, that's an immense challenge.
Wow, what makes it so hard?
Because you have to precisely control the movement of the sensor itself, this little chip, while it's housed inside a module where the lenses might also be shifting for the variable zoom. You've got multiple moving parts that all need to be perfectly coordinated. It requires incredibly fast, incredibly precise micro actuators that can handle high-frequency vibrations without generating too much heat or consuming too much power. It would be a genuine engineering marvel if they've actually managed it.
Okay, let's talk about light gathering on this fancy periscope.
Mhm.
You mentioned earlier the typical limitation. They have narrow apertures, right? Like f3.5 or even f4.9, which really limits the light getting in, especially compared to the main sensor.
Absolutely.
If Samsung's put all this effort into low light performance on the main sensor with hexadecabinning, surely they have to address this telephoto weakness too. Otherwise, your zoom shots are still going to be noisy in anything but bright daylight.
You'd think so. It's physics, right? Longer focal lengths generally require narrower apertures to maintain sharpness across the frame. But you're right, it's a major bottleneck for telephoto quality.
So what could they do?
Well, the hope is that if they've managed this new variable zoom mechanism, maybe they've also paired it with a slightly larger sensor inside the periscope module itself. And crucially, perhaps they've managed to widen the maximum aperture.
To what kind of level?
Even getting it down towards, say, f3.0 would make a huge difference compared to the f4.5 or f4.9 we often see in long periscopes now. A jump from f4.9 to f3.0 lets in roughly 2.5 times more light.
Okay, that's significant.
It really is. That combination, maybe a slightly bigger sensor, a wider f3.0 aperture, plus the variable zoom, would drastically improve telephoto performance, allowing for much cleaner, brighter zoomed shots in dimmer conditions without having to crank the ISO up into noisy territory. It feels vital if they want to maintain that ultra-granding consistently across all lenses.
Right, makes sense. Okay, that covers the long end. What about the other lens, the ultra-wide? I was particularly interested in the claim that it might double up as a high-resolution macro lens, potentially getting rid of those awful dedicated 2-megapixel macro sensors we still sometimes see.
Yes, that seems to be the direction. The sources suggest the ultrawide itself will get a significant sensor upgrade. The focus seems to be on improving edge-to-edge sharpness. Ultrawides often get soft in the corners, and also using new, more sophisticated distortion correction algorithms to fight that fisheye or barrel distortion effect you often get.
Okay, so a better ultra-wide in general, but the macro part.
Right, the dual functionality seems to be the key advancement here. The thinking is, an ultra-wide lens naturally has a much closer minimum focusing distance than the main camera lens.
Oh, okay.
So by pairing that inherent close focusing ability with a high-quality upgraded sensor, maybe 50 megapixels or so, and advanced autofocus capabilities on that lens, the system can just use the existing high-quality ultra-wide hardware to capture really detailed close-up macro shots.
Instead of needing a separate, tiny, low-quality macro lens.
Exactly. You eliminate the need for that cheap, dedicated macro lens entirely. So instead of getting a grainy, low-res 2MP or 5MP macro photo, you could potentially get a really sharp, detailed macro shot using the main ultra-wide sensor. That would be a vastly superior approach.
Yeah, that sounds much more practical. Okay, before we get into the software magic that has to tie all this impressive hardware together, let's take another quick break for our sponsor. Face Naturals Organic Skincare. Did you know that your skin is not only your largest organ, but also one of the most vital in protecting your body and supporting overall health? What you apply to your skin matters because it absorbs up to 80% of what you put on it, allowing those ingredients to enter your body. So why use conventional skincare products filled with harmful, toxic ingredients that could do more harm than good? At Face Naturals, we believe in nurturing your skin with safe, natural, and effective ingredients that support your health and well-being. Visit facenaturals.com to explore our range of natural skincare products designed to protect and nourish your skin. Visit facenaturals.com to save 10% on your next healthy skincare purchase. Healthy skin starts here.
Welcome back. So we've laid out the hardware. The potential 250 MP main sensor with clever binning, the possible variable optical zoom periscope, the improved ultra-wide doubling as macro. It sounds revolutionary on paper.
Right.
But as we know, mobile photography today is arguably defined just as much, if not more, by computational photography. The raw data coming off those sensors is just the start. It has to be processed, interpreted, and turned into the final image we see. And that intelligence, that processing power, resides mainly in the NPU, the neural processing unit within that new Exynos 3400 chip.
Okay, so what's the big software leap expected here?
Well, the sources suggest the biggest jump is moving beyond just simple AI scene optimization, where the camera just says, oh, that's food, or that's a sunset.
Yeah, the basic labels.
Right. The expectation is that the S26 Ultra system will perform full semantic segmentation, and that's a crucial difference.
Okay, define semantic segmentation for us again. It sounds like the AI is just getting better at identifying stuff, but what does that practically do for the final photo? How does it make it better?
Think of it like surgical precision versus a blunt instrument. Simple AI recognizes this is a landscape photo. Semantic segmentation goes much deeper. It identifies every individual element within that scene.
Like what?
Like it maps out the specific area that is sky, the specific patches that are green leaves, the precise outline of a person's face in the foreground, the texture of a brick wall, the surface of the road. It understands the meaning of each part of the image.
Okay, and then what?
And then, crucially, it can apply localized adjustments based on what that specific element actually needs. It doesn't just apply one global filter over the whole image.
Ah, I see. So it can treat the sky differently from the face.
Exactly. This granularity is what allows for supposedly much superior high dynamic range, or HDR, processing. Let's take a classic tricky shot. A portrait where the person is backlit, maybe standing against a bright sky.
Yeah, usually the face is too dark or the sky is totally white.
Right. Old school global HDR might try to brighten the face and darken the sky, but often it ends up looking flat, artificial, kind of overcooked. With semantic segmentation, the system identifies the face as a face and the sky as sky. It can then intelligently lift the shadows only on the face, while simultaneously preserving the highlight detail only in the sky, maybe even boosting the blue saturation there slightly.
Without making the face look weird or the sky look unnatural.
That's the goal, to get a much more balanced, natural-looking result that preserves detail at both extremes because the adjustments are targeted precisely where they're needed.
Okay, that level of granular real-time understanding sounds incredibly demanding, especially if you try to apply it to video, not just stills. What are the rumored video specs, and is this semantic processing really powerful enough to handle something like, say, 8K video at 60 frames per second?
Well, yeah, 8K at 60 fps is the rumored top spec, which just on its own is a data nightmare to manage.
Huge files.
Massive. But the really impressive claim, the key technological hurdle they need to clear, is that the NPU is expected to handle this kind of real-time semantic HDR processing in video, not just on single photos.
So as someone's walking through a scene with changing light, the camera is constantly analyzing and adjusting different parts of the 8K 60 frame.
That's the potential, yes. Imagine the system identifying and correctly exposing a backlit person's face while keeping the bright background controlled frame by frame at 60 frames per second in 8K resolution. That requires an absolutely immense amount of processing power working continuously.
Which brings us back to file sizes and codecs. How do you even manage that much data? You mentioned 8K 60 fps filling up storage fast.
Right. This is where the discussion around codecs becomes critical. We really need to see if Samsung implements AV1 encoding. AV1 is a much newer, more efficient video codec compared to the H.265 or HEVC that most phones use now.
More efficient how? Smaller files.
Significantly smaller files for the same level of visual quality, or alternatively, much better quality at the same file size. If they implement AV1 encoding for these 8K 60 streams, it would be almost essential to make the feature actually usable for more than just a few seconds of recording. It could mean the difference between filling your 512 GB phone in 20 minutes versus maybe an hour or more.
Okay, AV1 is one key thing to look for. Now, for the more pro users, people who might actually want to edit this 8K footage later, the color depth becomes really important, right? The sources were questioning 10-bit versus maybe even 12-bit color. What's the difference, and why does it matter for editing?
This is potentially one of the biggest differentiators between just shooting consumer video and capturing something closer to professional-grade footage. Standard video on most devices uses 8-bit color depth.
Which gives you how many colors?
About 16.7 million colors per channel. Sounds like a lot, right? But when you move up to 10-bit color, that jumps to over 1 billion colors per channel.
Wow, okay.
And if the rumors of 12-bit color depth support are true, you're talking about a staggering 68 billion colors per channel.
Okay, my brain can't even comprehend 68 billion colors. Why does that practically matter when I'm editing?
It matters hugely for flexibility and quality. The big advantage is that it virtually eliminates color banding, especially in smooth gradients, think like a clear blue sky, or subtle shadows on a wall. With 8-bit, you can sometimes see distinct steps or bands of color. 10-bit helps a lot, and 12-bit basically makes it disappear.
Gotcha. Smoother gradients.
Yes, but even more importantly, it provides vastly more dynamic range information within the file. This gives serious editors immense latitude when they're color grading in post-production software like DaVinci Resolve or Premiere Pro.
Meaning they can push the colors around more?
Exactly. You can push the exposure up or down significantly, change the white balance more dramatically, adjust saturation and contrast much more aggressively, all without the image starting to fall apart, break down, or show nasty artifacts. For anyone doing serious video work, having 12-bit color depth, especially in 8K, is arguably the killer feature, maybe even more so than the resolution itself.
Okay, so whether you're a casual user benefiting from the semantic HDR automatically or a pro editor needing that 12-bit color depth, it really boils down to the sheer density of the data being captured and processed, providing the quality.
Precisely.
Which leads us nicely into still photography for the enthusiasts. The rumors mention the Expert RAW app potentially supporting 16-bit RAW capture. Now, we're not just talking billions of colors, we're talking about tonal information, right? Data latitude.
Yes, we absolutely have to pause on that 16-bit RAW claim, because if that turns out to be true and well implemented, it is genuinely game-changing for a smartphone.
Why? How does it compare to typical RAW files from phones or even cameras?
Most consumer RAW files, even from dedicated cameras sometimes, are often processed down or compressed to maybe 10-bit or 12-bit linear data. Moving to a true 16-bit RAW output means the file contains exponentially more tonal information. We're talking brightness levels, shadow detail, highlight detail.
Okay, put that in numbers.
In practical terms, a 16-bit RAW file can capture over 65,000 distinct tonal values per color channel. Compare that to a standard 8-bit JPEG, which only has 256 levels per channel.
65,000 versus 256. That's a massive difference.
It's enormous. So when you take that 16-bit RAW file into software like Adobe Lightroom or Capture One for editing, this incredible amount of data gives you unbelievable flexibility. You can pull detail out of shadows that look completely black in the preview, or recover information from highlights that seem totally blown out to white, all non-destructively.
So you can fix mistakes or make creative choices much more easily.
Far more easily and with much higher quality. You gain this incredible post-processing flexibility that, until now, has really only been available on high-end professional mirrorless or DSLR cameras. For the serious photo enthusiast, this feature alone, if executed well, could almost justify the entire camera system investment. It fundamentally changes what's possible with the phone camera file.
And we'd assume that the usual manual control, shutter speed, ISO, manual focus, white balance would be available in this Pro Mode or Expert RAW app across all the rear lenses to really let people take advantage of that 16-bit data.
That's absolutely the expectation, yes. Full manual control is pretty much essential if you're going to give users access to that level of data depth. You need to be able to precisely control the exposure triangle, aperture, where possible, shutter speed, and ISO to really maximize the potential of that 16-bit capture. The combination of potentially unprecedented data density with full creative control across the entire camera array, that's what could solidify the S26 Ultra as a genuinely serious photographic tool, not just a point and shoot.
Okay, we've definitely established that the S26 Ultra, based on these sources, sounds like an incredibly ambitious, almost moonshot-level engineering project. It seems like they're trying to tackle nearly every traditional physical limitation of mobile photography all at once.
It certainly seems that way on paper.
But ambition, as we know, is always tested by harsh reality, which raises a really important question. What are the practical limitations? What are the technical hurdles that could potentially undermine all these amazing sounding features, even if the specs themselves turn out to be accurate?
Yeah, this is crucial. The immediate number one concern that jumps out has to be thermal management. Heat.
Dealing with all that processing power.
Exactly. Processing 250 megapixel RAW files, running those complex variable binning algorithms constantly, recording continuous 8K 6050Cs video with real-time semantic HDR, all of that generates an enormous amount of waste heat. And that's likely amplified by that new, dense 2-nanometer processor architecture. Even if it's efficient for its power, it's still packing a lot into a tiny space.
So what's the risk? The phone just gets hot.
The risk is thermal throttling. While the rumors do mention advanced cooling things like bigger vapor chambers, maybe graphene heat spreaders, which are good at moving heat sideways, the critical test is, will that cooling system be sufficient to prevent the phone from having to slow itself down to protect its components? Throttling is when the system deliberately lowers its own performance. It might slow down the processor, dim the screen, even drop video frame rates just to avoid overheating.
Right. So if you start recording in 8K 60, and after 5 minutes the phone throttles and drops frames, or forces you to stop,
then the whole utility of that headline feature is basically negated, isn't it? The cooling performance absolutely has to match the raw computational power, otherwise the specs are just theoretical.
Okay, heat is number one. What's next? We touched on data volume before.
Right, the other side of that computational intensity coin is the sheer volume of data being generated and moved around inside the phone. We need to talk about data throughput and storage speed.
Because those files are huge.
Potentially massive. We estimated a single 250 megapixel 16-bit RAW file could easily top 300 megabytes. Now imagine you take a burst of 5 or 10 of those high-res photos in quick succession. All that data, maybe gigabytes worth, has to be written to the phone's internal storage almost instantly.
So the storage needs to be fast enough to keep up.
Incredibly fast. This is why the expected inclusion of UFS 4.0 storage is so important. For listeners, UFS 4.0 is the latest standard for mobile flash storage, and it offers roughly double the sequential read and write speeds compared to the previous generation, UFS 3.1.
Double the speed.
Yeah, which is essential here. You need those kinds of multi-gigabyte per second write speeds to prevent the camera app from becoming bottlenecked by the storage. If the storage can't keep pace with the data coming off the sensor and processor,
Then you get lag.
you get lag between shots, maybe the inability to shoot rapid bursts, or even worse, the camera app might just freeze temporarily while it tries to clear the buffer. The storage speed has to be perfectly matched to handle this kind of high bandwidth workflow smoothly.
Okay, so thermals and storage speed are critical infrastructure. What about the actual image capture process itself? How reliable can we expect the autofocus system to be, especially when it's dealing with that massive 250 MP sensor plane?
Yeah, autofocus reliability across such a huge high-resolution sensor, particularly in tricky low light, is another major validation point we need to see tested. The system reportedly relies on a combination of PDA-F phase detection autofocus and potentially a new laser assist module.
How does PDA-F work on such a big sensor?
Well, PDA-F works by having dedicated pixels on the sensor that split the incoming light and compare the phase difference between the two resulting images. The system can then calculate exactly how far and in which direction to move the lens to achieve sharp focus. It's generally very fast and accurate in good light.
But the size complicates it.
The sheer size of the 250 MP sensor could complicate it, yes. You need to ensure those PDA-F points are distributed effectively across the entire sensor area. Otherwise, you might risk focus hunting or inaccuracies, especially towards the edges of the frame. And in low light, phase detection relies on having enough contrast in the scene to work reliably, which is obviously diminished.
So that's where the laser assist comes in.
Presumably. The laser assist module actively projects an infrared pattern onto the subject, giving the autofocus system something clear to lock onto, even in very dark conditions. The combination needs to work seamlessly to ensure the camera can lock focus quickly and accurately, and crucially, track moving subjects reliably, especially during that demanding 8K 60 video recording where smooth, continuous autofocus is absolutely non-negotiable. Any focus, pulsing, or hunting in video is immediately noticeable and jarring.
Absolutely. Okay, final hurdle. powering this whole technological marvel. We've got the massive sensor, the potentially power-hungry processor and NPU running complex AI, the mechanical zoom and stabilization systems. These are all potentially huge power drains, aren't they?
Massive power hogs, yes. The entire camera subsystem, the sensor readout, the ISP, the MPU crunching algorithms constantly, plus driving the high-resolution, high-brightness display needed to preview the image typically consumes more battery power than almost any other single function on a smartphone.
So how does the phone balance this incredible performance potential with just basic all-day usability? Nobody wants a camera phone that dies by lunchtime.
That really is the most practical, everyday hurdle they need to clear. We have to hope that the rumored new battery technology, maybe improved battery chemistry or density, combined with the inherent power efficiency gains from that 2-nanometer Exynos processor, are enough to significantly offset the increased power demand.
It's a balancing act.
It's a critical balancing act. If a user enables 16-bit RAW mode, starts shooting bursts, records some 8K 60 FPS video, and finds their battery has plummeted by 50% in just an hour, well, then the device becomes a very powerful but ultimately niche tool, not a practical daily driver. Real-world usability demands that the efficiency gains keep pace with, or ideally exceed, the immense power demands of managing 250 million pixels of data continuously. Battery life will be a huge factor in the final verdict.
Definitely something we'll need to see tested thoroughly. Okay, before we wrap things up and try to deliver a verdict based on what we know, let's hear one last time from our sponsor. Face Naturals Organic Skincare. Did you know that your skin is not only your largest organ, but also one of the most vital in protecting your body and supporting overall health? What you apply to your skin matters because it absorbs up to 80% of what you put on it, allowing those ingredients to enter your body. So why use conventional skincare products filled with harmful, toxic ingredients that can do more harm than good? At Face Naturals, we believe in nurturing your skin with safe, natural, and effective ingredients that support your health and well-being. Visit facenaturals.com to explore our range of natural skincare products designed to protect and nourish your skin. Visit facenaturals.com to save 10% on your next healthy skincare purchase. Healthy skin starts here. Okay, let's try and synthesize everything we've dug into during this deep dive. If we boil it down, the core technical takeaway seems to be that Samsung is reportedly trying to engineer a way around that classic conflict in photography, the trade-off between resolution and sensitivity. By using this intelligent hexadecapixel binning, the idea is the sensor can be a chameleon. It can deliver high sensitivity, low noise, maybe 15.6 MP image when needed for dim light, or it can deliver a super high resolution 250 MP image when you need detail or want that computational zoom capability, adapting almost instantly based on the situation.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Looking at the specs laid out in these sources, it really points towards a highly calculated, extremely aggressive strategy. The potential success of this S26 Ultra camera system seems to rest almost entirely on a seamless, symbiotic relationship.
Between the hardware and the software.
Exactly. Between the advanced hardware, that big isocell sensor, the potentially variable periscope optics, and the incredibly capable software needed to drive it, the dynamic binning algorithms, the semantic segmentation AI, and crucially, the immense processing horsepower of that Exynos NPU. This doesn't feel like just an incremental update. It looks much more like a fundamentally new architectural approach to mobile imaging.
Kind of replacing physical limitations with computational cleverness wherever possible.
That seems to be the philosophy, yes. Now, the potential impact, and it's a big if they manage to overcome those significant hurdles we talked about, the thermals, the storage speed, the data management, the autofocus consistency, the battery drain.
Right.
If they clear those hurdles decisively, then the S26 Ultra could genuinely promise unprecedented versatility. We're talking potentially professional-grade 16-bit RAW capture for enthusiasts, brilliant point-and-shoot low-light performance for casual users, thanks to the binning, and extreme-range, near-lossless computational zoom that bridges the gap to the optical lenses. The key, though, is absolutely in the execution. It all relies on those algorithms running perfectly in milliseconds.
So the final verdict really has to wait for detailed, hands-on reviews and testing. We can't judge it just from the spec sheet, however impressive it sounds. But that spec sheet does tell a compelling story. It suggests maybe the era of just blindly chasing higher brute force megapixel numbers might finally be giving way to an age of more intelligent cameras. Cameras that are smart enough to completely change their own operating configuration on the fly to deliver the best possible image for the specific conditions.
Exactly. I think the sophistication here, if it works, is really in the adaptability, not just in the raw pixel count itself.
Which brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over after this. It features like high-quality 16-bit raw capture, giving you that incredible post-processing flexibility, becomes standard on high-end smartphones. And if computational zoom really does manage to eliminate the quality gap between, say, 1x and 5x optical zoom, does the sheer power of this computational ingenuity start to effectively eliminate the need for most casual, professional, or maybe semi-professional standalone cameras? Could we see the competitive landscape shift almost entirely away from debates about physical hardware size towards who has the smartest, most ingenious processing software? Something to think about. Thank you so much for listening to Life Redacted. We truly appreciate having you join us each week to explore the life, insights, and conversations that matter. Your support means the world to us, and it's what keeps us going. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider subscribing to stay updated on our latest episodes, and give us a like to let us know you're enjoying the show. It really helps us reach more listeners like you.